what was it like to make the music for the most popular television show about trains? All aboard!
In days past, the Roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to The Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozarek, and this is episode number 113 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby, you name it, and we discuss it. Today, we are joined by two guests. In fact, this made it such a big episode, we're splitting it into two episodes. But part one, we are talking to Mike O'Donnell. He was one of the two original composers for the Thomas and Friends TV show about Thomas the Tank Engine. That famous theme song, that was partially his work. We get to talk to him about what it was like to create the soundscape for this show, something that hadn't been done before, and just talking in general about the concept of matching music and images of railroading. The reason that I've wanted to talk about the music of Thomas and Friends on the podcast for a while, and why we're doing so today, is because it's very easy to take that music for granted, or in general, the concept of pairing railroad imagery to music as a very simple, straightforward thing. But I think that there's a lot more creativity to it than meets the eye. I'm not just a podcaster. I'm also a freelance filmmaker and a musician. And when I'm doing film work for my clients as part of Streamliner Media, I'm very mindful of the role that music takes in portraying whatever it is that I'm representing. So if I'm representing an infrastructure project for a railroad, I'm mindful of what the music says and the feeling it conveys about that subject. The music of Thomas and Friends has such a big role in defining the characters of the TV series, and I think that we can learn something through that. So part one, we're talking to Mike O'Donnell, who composed the music with his partner Junior Campbell, and part two, we're talking to Luke Pickman, who goes by the name of Instrument Maniac on YouTube, who has taken these themes and reinterpreted them using live instruments. Hopefully that gives you a sense of why we're having this conversation on the show today. Before we get to that, though, as always, I want to thank those of you who are supporting The Roundhouse on Patreon, patreon.com/The Roundhouse. If you are subscribed for $5 a month or more, you are getting to hear these episodes a week in advance. I really appreciate the support. I also want to thank the Age of Steam Roundhouse for sponsoring today's episode. You can step back in time to see the culmination of Jerry Joe Jacobson's vision and explore his period-correct, accurately constructed brick roundhouse. For more information, visit their website at ageofsteamroundhouse.org. Our guest today is a composer from film and television. You probably know him best for a little ditty that he wrote for A Little Blue Tank Engine. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Mr. Mike O'Donnell.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here.
It is fantastic to have you on the show. I must confess, I think my 3-year-old self would be pretty stoked to know that I'm getting to talk to you. Actually, my current 30-year-old self is pretty excited as well. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. What led you into a life of music?
Well, I grew up in Liverpool back in the 60s. I was sort of a teenager, and everyone was in a band in Liverpool in the 60s because we just got rock and roll. A lot of skiffle groups started up, and of course then we got the Beatles, which changed everything. And it was one of those eras that you just, every guy wanted to be in a band, and that was it. We'd stare in the music shop windows at these brilliant Fender guitars and all the rest of it. and couldn't wait to get out there and start gigging. And really, that was it. That's what started me on the road of music. That's what did it, was the Beatles and skiffle groups and rock and roll.
At some point, then you move from just having a band into composing for TV commercials, as I understand it.
Yeah, well, it was a point in the music business life that really you had to be in London, where all the record companies were. So our band moved to London, and of course we shacked up in this flat and immediately split up because we couldn't stand each other. It was driving us all nuts. So, and I got to meet a few people and decided it would be nice to do some jingles. This was very early days, and I worked with Junior on some of that stuff as well. And so that's how you made the money in those days. I mean, we never thought about children's television. It was just commercials and in advertising, basically. I mean, the band had split up, so that wasn't going to happen anymore. Sorry, I butted in there. You carry on.
That's quite all right. When did you first meet Junior? How did you know that you two would fit as a partnership?
Well, I was running Ringo's studio. We're now you've jumped ahead a bit there, because it was about mid '70s, and I was running Ringo's studio, and Junior and I had shared the same publisher, and he lived not far away from that studio, so he used it for some of the projects he was working on for CBS, etc. And of course, I was running the place, so we just, we got on really well, him being Scottish and me being a Scouser, similar backgrounds, and yeah, we just hit it off, and then the rest, as they say, is history.
What do you define as a good musical partnership in general, based off of your one with him and maybe others that you've connected in the industry?
I think there's got to be give and take in a musical partnership. You can't both be right all the time. So if it's a good thing to think, well, I don't agree with him about that certain echo, but it's not important. It really isn't important. No one's going to die. So you back down, or he backs down, or do you know what I mean? It's just good to keep it light and remember what you're trying to do. It's not an ego trip. I think you have a problem when you've got two big egos and then they won't back down, and then you've got a problem. A bit like Lennon and McCartney, I think.
Did you get to talk to Ringo? I mean, I'm sure he's always been inundated with questions about his time in that band. So did you talk at all with him about that and his perspective on that? Or did you just find yourself mainly looking at other elements of musical discussion and music business?
Yeah, we didn't really discuss. Are you talking about discussing the Beatles and what he did in the Beatles? Yeah, no. He was never really that comfortable talking about the Beatles. Well, because they'd only really just split up 4 years previously, or 5 years. So, and he was the one, I think, who probably not had the most to lose, but found it difficult to find his own way without the rest of the band. So he never really wanted to talk about it. So we just used to have a giggle and drink lots of brandy.
When did you first learn about the Railway series? Did you learn about it at the time that you became aware of the production of the TV show, or had you known about it from your own childhood as the series of books?
No, I'd heard of it, but I'd never read any of the books when I was a kid. It wasn't really on my radar at all. So I really learned about it through when I found out about them doing the actual TV series. And that's the first time I read anything about it, to tell you the truth.
And how did you first find out about the development of the show?
As I said, I was working at Ringo's studio, and he was asked to, as you know, to narrate it. And I learned who he was going to meet on that day to discuss the project at Clearwater Features, which was Dave Mitten's company. And I got Brett Allcroft's name and number from the receptionist, who was very nicely gave it to me. And I just called her up and I said, "Do you have the music sorted out for the show?" And she said, "Well, not yet, but we're pitching it out." So I said, "Well, do you mind if I have a go?" She said, "Yeah, not at all. Great, more the merrier." And so then I spoke to Junior and said, "Look, do you fancy coming in? I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. Probably not. But, we could have a crack and just come up with a few ideas." And we came up with 3 demos. One of them became Toby's theme. Another one became Edward's theme, I think. And the other one became the Thomas theme. So that's pretty much how it happened.
It feels daunting, obviously, when you were looking at the blank page in front of you. Nobody knew Thomas would be a big thing, so in some ways the stakes were low, but at the same time, there's no kind of template to go off of to tell you this is what Thomas's music is supposed to sound like, even just his main theme, let alone the subsequent themes you develop. How do you fill that page with even just initial ideas to get yourself going there?
Well, I knew Ringo was going to be doing the narration at that time, and I kind of had this idea that I wanted to make it like Mean Mr. Mustard by the Beatles. I don't know if you're familiar with that track, not musically, but feel-wise. That's what I was aiming for. And of course, not having done children's TV stuff before, in fact, any children's music before, we weren't funneled into a certain way or using certain instruments. I really wanted to keep it like a band feel, and which I think we did. And I think that's what made it different or made it stand out from the other candidates, really, I guess. I never heard what they put in, but I presume that's how it was. So, and we were young then. And it just seemed right. It was just a nice little track, and it worked well. And the idea also was to make it so it wasn't just for kids; it was for grandparents and parents, and everybody would like it. So that's what we did. That's how it all came about.
You were working with synthesizers, and this is 1983, 1984. It seems to me that there was a specific soundscape to a lot of, especially pop synth. One of the songs that comes to mind, that I don't know if it was crafted with the exact models you used, but Break My Stride by Matthew Wilder. It has a little bit of that kind of chuffing quality to its synths and that brightness that has acoustic similarities, not melodic, but acoustic similarities to the sound of Thomas. And so it seems like that's kind of where the musical pop conversation was at the time, would you say?
Well, I mean, you were quite limited at the time with what instruments you could use. And I mean, we started off with a little Roland Jupiter 6, and which was really limited in its sound. You couldn't change much in it. And so the Lindrum we used to use, and a real piano and a tambourine and a bass guitar as well. They were the main instruments that we used for the early days. As it progressed, newer instruments came in. You got samplers, you got much better synths, and that's why it progressed in actual fact over the years. But that's what we started with, and that gave it that sound. And I wish I still had that Jupiter 6, but we sold it donkeys years ago, and for not a lot of money as well. But anyway, that's the kit we had. So that's and don't forget, we weren't brought up with synths. We were brought up with guitars and bass and drums and pianos and things like that. So it was all new to us, this synthesizer. We never were a synth couple, if you like, and everything we did was really based on real instruments.
Andrew Green asks, how did both you and Junior approach writing the themes for each character? So once you're informed that your demo has been selected and they want you to do the first series, how do you then go about determining all these other themes for all these other characters?
We wrote them pretty much as we were going along. We didn't sort of write 6 theme tunes and put them into Brit Allcroft. We were lucky enough to have the visuals by this time. We started off with the main Thomas theme, but then as we got working on it, Percy would be introduced, or James, or all the rest of it. So we knew we had to write a theme for Percy or James. And you could see by the visuals what the characters were like. I mean, that's really what gave us the inspiration to have all these different character themes. It literally was taken from the visuals that we could see, and also the narration. So what they thought of things, you know what I mean? It's difficult to describe, but that's how it worked out anyway.
Obviously, the genres of music that you explored through these themes varied greatly. Rudy Newman asks, which composers helped inspire your work?
If it's composers you took, for me, it would be Lennon and McCartney, because I've always been a massive Beatles fan, going right back to like 62 or 3, whenever they came about. So, I still, think of them as the mentors, really. I think they were, it was great. I mean, McCartney's so talented. I would love to know how Lennon would get on nowadays, but McCartney's one of my favorite writers of all time.
So even when you're doing more classical themes like Edward or Gordon, your inspiration is more coming from, say, George Martin, the 5th Beatle, the longtime producer of the Beatles, and work that he'd do on songs like Day in a Life or Eleanor Rigby, as opposed to, say, the classical musicians or composers of 100 or 200 years ago, like Mozart and Haydn. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, but I was going to say Mozart because he's another, to me, he's like McCartney of the day, of back then, do you know what I mean? So, and he's a great guy to steal from if you want a little line, do you know what I mean? Just nick a bit of Mozart, you can't go wrong, you really can't. So they were an influence, obviously, but and you can tell from Gordon and all the rest of it, they are obviously not based on, but they are with a nod to the classicals.
Were you aware that because you were doing these themes in different musical styles, did you ever feel a need to kind of make sure there was some kind of unifying element? Because on the one hand, you'll have some very classical inspired pieces, and then on the other hand, you might have some very jazz inspired pieces like James or Percy or Birdie. Was there ever a concern or a thought specifically to how you have these different musical styles, but they need to feel like they belong in the same universe? Or did that just kind of naturally fit?
It just kind of naturally came about. I mean, a lot of it's down to the instrumentation. I mean, the original James piece was obviously stolen from some classical composer, but I can't remember who, and don't sue me. But because we're using the same instruments as we were for Percy's theme, although Percy's a lot more light-hearted and aimed at a younger audience, James is a bit jazzier and slightly different. But because we're doing it and it's the same instruments, they're bound to sound similar.
The Age of Steam Roundhouse, a true treasure of railroad preservation in Sugar Creek, Ohio, continues to make great strides with a number of unique restoration projects. Right now, on their website, ageofsteamroundhouse.org, you can read their Roundhouse reports to see the ongoing restoration to operation of Eureka Western No. 19, the locomotive featured in the film Emperor of the North, 2 passenger cars, and the completion of Moorhead and North Fork No. 12. To plan your visit and experience tours and special events, check out their website at ageofsteamroundhouse.org and follow them on social media. With your collaboration with Junior, recognizing the importance of other contributions and kind of the melding of ideas, the times you're right, the times you're wrong. Can you listen to any of the songs and go, oh, that was a Junior idea, or that was my idea? Or do they just kind of blend together because of the nature of your dynamic with him?
No, because when we were doing this, Junior might come into the studio and say, "Look, I've got an idea for Gordon or something," and then we'd work on it in the studio together. Or I'd come in with an idea for Percy, for example, and then we develop it together in the studio. But we each developed stuff at home as well. It wasn't all done on the fly. It was some of it was actually worked out, believe it or not. Yeah, that's how it was. But I guess Junior's, because he studied music at the Royal College of Music and was much more comfortable with classical music than I was. I was certainly rock and roll, and he was more classical. So that's another reason why I think it worked, because we were able to, well, we don't want Percy to sound too classical because he's a little idiot, So you want, it's just the way it was. And sometimes someone come in with I might come in with an idea, and Junior didn't like it very much, and we thought, we'll scrap that, we'll do something else. That's, sometimes how it worked as well.
Eric Kapusta asks, which character theme is your favorite? And do you know what Junior's favorite character theme is?
My favorite theme it's got to be Thomas, because that's what started it all. I mean, they're all, I'm not saying they're all great, but they're all good. And some of them are better than the others. But Thomas, I think, is the one, because that's what kicked it all off. Unfortunately, I don't know what Junior's favorite is. I haven't got a clue. You'll have to ask him, but I don't know.
When you started composing with synths, the technology was rudimentary. There was only a limited soundscape you could work with. How did the evolution of synths allow you greater creative freedom as the series progressed?
Well, for example, the Jupiter 6, I mean, although it says it's like an oboe sound, it's not. It couldn't be further from the truth. But because of what it was playing, and obviously if you had a real player in there, it would be an oboe. But it's not, it really is type of thing. And as when they brought out the Proteus range, EMU Proteus, they had some great strings in there, and we tweaked them. But I mean, it was like a different world then when they came along, and the Jupiter got used less and less, and we really that really was the beginning of the more classical thing, because you could actually get strings in a box. We used them, and it worked out well. Actually, it was a nice transition. I mean, we stopped using the Jupiter in probably by series 2, I would think, somewhere around there. But certainly series 3.
I don't know if this would be the pinnacle or not, but when you talk about the ability to move in a further classical direction sonically because the technology involved, I think of the season 5 combination of the Runaway Train theme with the William Tell Overture.
Yeah.
And how lush that sounded because you could work in all that different instrumentation.
Yes, absolutely. And it was obviously, in the show, it was a long piece of music, the Runaway Train theme. And the William Tell Overture just seemed to fit with it. It was just a great little bit of relief from the which is almost Cowboys and Indians. But yeah, it worked well, and that really was. You're right. That was the beginning of the orchestral stuff, because we could, before you couldn't have done the William Tell Overture on a Jupiter 6. You just wouldn't have done it. Well, you could do, but I mean, it would have sounded awful. So, I mean, looking back on it, for the instruments that are around today, a lot better today than they were in the 80s, the ones that we had, even with the Proteus ones. So, it all moves on a bit, doesn't it? And basically that was the way that was, that's how the orchestral thing came about, I think. That was the beginning of it.
Where did the idea for the sing-along songs come from? And did your process for creating those differ from when you were creating short character themes?
Oh yes, very much so. The idea for the songs came from Britt and David. We were summoned to the offices. I can't remember if we went to Britt's place or David. Anyway, and they said, "Look, we want to do 6 or 8 songs, and these will be 3-minute songs." And on the first batch was the Island song. Now they came up with the title of the Island song, and we always thought it would be a great opener for a stage show. That particular piece. It never materialised that way, but we did the song anyway, and they proved very popular, especially in America, and they sold really well, and it helped. It helped the bring back a bit of life into the series stuff because it was another product. It was a different product because it was songs, and I think that was the general idea. But they all came from Britt and David. Every one of them, they'd say, right, the Island song, we never did a Gordon one, funnily enough. The Thomas anthem, we were asked to do that, and which is a bit of the Thomas theme in there and then something else. So, yeah, it was Britt and David that came up with this idea, not us, unfortunately.
I imagine it was liberating to try new ideas now that you were working with something that was 3 minutes as opposed to 30 seconds to 1 minute of a theme. Especially with the Island song, listening to that, it has such this anthemic nature. Or even He's a Real Useful Engine and how it takes this one motif you had in this whole other direction.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. And also, don't forget, the character themes had no vocals on them. None of them did. They were all just instrumentals. And as you say, they were all, 30 seconds long, if you were lucky. So to be able to do a 3-minute song with children singing it and the whole bit, was a great challenge. But also it was fantastic. We really enjoyed doing those. So we used to do off the back of. We did the first batch, basically from series 1, and then I think there was a gap, and then we did one after the other. Every time we finished the series, we'd have to write 6 more songs. And pretty much until the end. But I think we wrote 35 songs in all, or thereabouts. And they were good. It was completely different. It was a completely different format, obviously, because they cobbled together some visuals for the videos. But the songs, we did use some of the songs in the later series as well. We stole bits, and but it's good. At least we were stealing it from ourselves. Speak to Jeff Lynne if you want to talk about stealing stuff.
This 6 songs a season goal or requirement, was that 6 original brand new themes for brand new characters or just different motifs? Because something that I'm thinking about that I have admired from your compositions is when you would take 2 character themes, separate ones, and if they were together in an episode, find a way to blend them together. Like there's an episode where Duck and Henry are together and you hear Henry's theme, and then there's a little duck motif in there, which was only in that episode. Was that one of the 6, or was that just something that as you're kind of composing the series music in general, you do that, and then you're introducing 6 new songs, themes, or ideas?
When we were working to the picture of the series, or whatever episode it was, sometimes the biggest one, the longest one, I think, was Bertie, Let's Have a Race, that one where he's having a race with Thomas. So you've got Thomas's theme and you've got Bertie's theme, basically, in one long piece of music. And we did do a song about that. The song was inspired after we'd done that show, for the series. So, Britt or David said, why don't we do one and let's call it Let's Have a Race? Great. We know exactly what we've got to do now. So that's pretty much, in a simplistic form, that's how that came about. But when they're in the series, it was just what went well with the pictures. And we did tie ourselves in a bit of a knot, giving everyone a theme, because all of a sudden you'd be working on something and it was Edward's theme you were using, and then all of a sudden you'd see James and you think, well, what are we going to do now? Because we've got to put James in there somewhere. So we were kind of forced into it, but it seemed to work well, and the kids loved the character themes. They went down very well.
Kids loved it, but the extent of love for the music seems to have spoken even beyond just kids. Jonas Snyder asks, how do you feel about the Thomas the Tank Engine having such a large teen and adult fan base? And I'm going to add on to that and say, when you were writing the music, was there an intentionality to make it speak beyond just kids, or were you thinking of kids specifically?
Well, obviously, Britt and David could reject music if they wanted to. I don't actually think they ever did. But anyway, they could have done. But they were very happy with the way it was going. And it was going deliberately not away from. I mean, the first episode, the beginning of the first series was quite kidsy, was quite aimed at a younger audience. But as the films got bigger, David Mitton was blowing things up all over the place. The stories were getting much more involved. It seemed to lend itself, well, we could make this, hence the classical bits, the William Tell Overture, I think, because adults will latch onto that. And I think that's what helped it, gain a lot of the success that it got, because it did appeal to parents and grandparents and kids, It's just the way it came about, really, and thank God it did.
Going into a little bit of music theory a bit, even the bass Thomas theme, you start out on the C major chord. To put it in non-music theory terms, C major is like a stable, vanilla, normal chord. Very solid, very safe. And then all of a sudden you go into A flat, which is a very interesting jump. And then the song as a whole is in A flat. So it seems to be that there is a kind of maturity to the chord structure, or something like the sad version of Henry's theme. Even just working on those primitive synths still has a complexity to it.
It's a bit like when Mozart said, I just like notes that go together. I mean, the C to the A flat really doesn't go, because it's kind of a strange thing it's a strange change. But it seemed to sound right to me. I know it's not, and Junior was always jumping up and down saying that you can't have that. I said, I'm having it because that's the way it is, and it seemed to work. And there's quite a few key changes in there, although it's pretty much all around the A flat. It goes all over the place, because I think it goes to a B flat, doesn't it, as well, for a bit. That's a different key change, but it just seemed to work, and it was written on a piano, so it wasn't like we were working on synths with that one. That was done on a piano. Musically, I'm sure I would get shot down in flames for it, but so many people, it's amazing, because it really shouldn't go together, but it kind of does. There's a few good songs that have done that in the past, though, haven't they? They sound a bit weird. You're thinking, what have they done there? But it makes you sit up and listen to it, because it's wrong.
When did you realize that Thomas actually was going to be a gigantic thing, evolving from that initial mindset of, oh, this may or may not take off?
Well, I mean, we did the first series, 26 episodes, I think it was, and we thought that would be it. We weren't thinking of series 2. No one was, because it was a different world then, and raising money for stuff. I mean, it's difficult now, but in those days it wasn't that difficult, because she had to gamble her house on it and all the rest of it, which she did, and there were certain people involved that were quite wealthy. Not Ringo, although I don't know if he did or he didn't, but I don't think he did. We all went to Clearwater Feature Studio to watch the first episodes run live on TV. And we just had a gut feeling, this is good. I mean, Ringo, I think Britt did a blinder employing Ringo to do the narration because of his Liverpool accent. It was like working class. You know what I mean? You could see the oil on the engines and things. It was, and the smoke and everything. Of course, nowadays you don't get any of that. But yeah, so I think we knew then, but I don't think we found out about Series 2 for a good year after that, or maybe 18 months before they raised enough money to do it, and interest, because America wouldn't take it because it was only 5 minutes long. So we couldn't have it shown in America. So although there was an awful lot of publicity around it, which Ringo helped enormously. And it just went from there, and then all of a sudden we're into Series 3 and 4 and so on and so forth.
Especially when Britt got around that by way of making Shining Time Station as a means of packaging the Short Thomas episodes in a larger live action series, that seemed to also catalyze it.
Yeah, that was a good move as well. Well, she didn't have a choice. No one would take a 5-minute kids episode because it wouldn't fit in with their time slot. So she had to devise Shining Time Station, and Thomas would be dumped in the middle of it, it worked well, there's no doubt about it. We didn't have anything to do with Shining Time Station. That was, stateside. So it worked well, and I think that, and then of course Ringo did Series 2. He was also the controller, wasn't he, in Shining Time Station for a while? Did you do that?
Yes, he played Mr. Conductor.
Yeah, Mr. Conductor. So I think he played an enormous part in Thomas's success because the parents would have known who he was, and it was just one of those things. He wasn't doing much because his band had split up, so he just kind of fell into doing it, and he really enjoyed it. It was good fun.
We've mentioned Britt Allcroft, creator of Thomas and Friends as a TV series, and David Mitton, director of the first several series, a few times, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about what it was like working for each of them.
The first series, we used to have briefing meetings. In other words, they'd show us the rough cuts or whatever it was, and we'd make notes about what they wanted and all the rest of it. But by the time we got to Series 2, I don't think we had any more briefing meetings because we kind of knew what we were doing, amazingly, and we probably knew what we were doing more than they did. I mean, they liked the finished product, but leave it to us. We'll sort this out, and thankfully we did. And so they really left us alone. I don't think there was any problems anywhere. No, I can't remember any problems that we had with the music, and also the schedule was punishing because we were always, as any composer will know, you're left till the last minute, but you've got to do it really good and you've got to do it very fast. Oh, no pressure then. So you don't have you can't keep redoing stuff. It's got to be, this is it. But having said that, I wouldn't change any of it. I think it all works really well. We got lucky. That's pretty much it.
The Strasburg Railroad is an institution in the heritage railroad industry, and its mechanical services department is proud to lead the way. With the knowledge and experience that has created one of the most reliable steam railroading experiences in the country, the Strasburg Railroad is excited to offer their expertise to the rest of the industry. Strasburg's professional team provides consulting and technical assistance to take your steam locomotive or railcar project from idea to finished product. They stand behind their work and always strive to meet their customers' needs for quality, historic accuracy, and reliability at a price that is fair. Unlike many competitors, they feature a fully equipped boiler, railcar, and machine shop, so the work gets done in-house, helping you to get more for your money. Send your inquiries to mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com and let the professionals get to work for you. What does the enormous success and legacy of the show, and knowing that you played a key role in helping it to become what it is today, what does that mean to you personally, Mike?
I love the idea that stuff that we wrote in 1983 and 4 and whenever it was is still around today, and there's a huge fan base for it. Mattel have taken the show on a different plane, it's completely different now. And I haven't seen the new stuff, but there's not many people like it, I believe. Everyone's up in arms about it. There's a lot of twittering going on. But, listen, it is what it is. And they paid a fortune for it. And hopefully they can get their money back because, it's a toy company at the end of the day. And they're not trying to make what Britt and David did and us. They're trying to sell toys. We never got involved in this, or Britt or David, with the idea of selling toys because there was no merchandising there. It didn't exist. And it took a while for it to, I think there was a company called, is it Hornby? Hornby Train. They were involved from day one because it was a natural fit. They did all these, that didn't make anyone any money. I mean, it was just, that was all getting plowed back into the show. And so it was done whereas Mattel have come along now and decided, well, we've got this now, we're going to change it and sell a load of toys on the back of it, which is what their business model is. And that's what they do, which is fine, I'm just really pleased that the shows that we worked on, first 7 series, whatever it was, are still out there and still really liked by the fans. And I think that makes me happy to know that it's still around, and probably will be till I'm gone.
It has incredible staying power. Your theme song in particular, I think it's hard to imagine how many millions of people have listened to that. The question I have for you, because I have an instance in my mind, what's the strangest context you've ever heard your theme song in?
Oh, well, I mean, a few people have done 10 cents, this rapping business that they do over it, which I found amazing. I mean, it's just brilliant. It's not very good, but some of it is, some of it really is. And Luke Pickman's a good guy. He does some good covers on a lot of it. And it's all up on YouTube, it really is. But I think 10 cents rapping, and there's another, is it 50 cents or 10? It's 50 cents.
50 Cent, I believe you're referring to. But yes, I mean, that's what I was going to mention is this whole cadre of remixes. And you guys joining us, I encourage you to go to YouTube and search Thomas the Rapping. You'll come up with a whole page of all sorts of different songs. Going back to what you said about the song, should it work with some of the key jumps, but it does, and that heavily rhythmic quality, I think that's why it lends itself to that meme culture.
Well, don't forget that wasn't around when we wrote it. So, I mean, it's great that people have done it. I really like it. Of course, it was never a 3-minute song, really, the theme tune. We did try and extend it a couple of times, but everyone just wanted to leave it alone. They didn't want to mess with it. Okay, fair enough. It's good. I can't think of anything else that's a bit weird on it. I mean, there's loads of weird stuff, but there's some really good covers people have done. There's a guy who's done, I don't remember his name now, I should have written it down. It's got a horn section and all the rest of it, and it's really jazzy. I'm not sure he doesn't play all the instruments. Anyway, people have done some amazing things with it, and those guys have got the chords right. A lot of people don't get the chords right, but probably because they've been trained musically and they think they can't have done that. Well, we did, folks.
Ross Patterson asks, have you had other opportunities to collaborate with Junior, either for other jobs or for fun?
No. I mean, we were working very closely for 20 years, and it was like 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. So when it was all over, it was kind of like, yeah, you know what I mean? Let's get out of here. And I could phone him up tomorrow and it would be like nothing's changed. But men don't seem to do that. And it doesn't, women do. Women phone each other all the time, but men kind of leave big gaps. So it's been a couple of years since I've spoken to him. But no, we're not going to work on anything else now for kids stuff. I'm trying to get my own show off the ground, which is all me, but very difficult to raise the finances. Very difficult in this day and age.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what you're engaged with these days. So you can talk a little bit about the show that you're involved with, as well as the fact that now you are releasing new interpretations of your old Thomas themes on CD and for digital release.
I don't know why I thought of it, but a lot of these themes no one had heard on their own. They'd only heard them in the context of the shows. They weren't really widely available just on their own. So obviously I couldn't use the originals because Mattel owned the rights to those things. So I decided to re-record them, and I did get legal advice on this, and they said that's fine as long as you re-record them, you can do that. So that's what I did, and it started off with Volume 1, and it was really well received. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I thought, can't be right, but I kept the tunes quite close to the originals because otherwise it's like 50 cents or whatever. There's no point in going nuts with it. You know what I mean? So I kept it close to the originals, but different enough to know that it's not the original. That was the plan, and it just went crazy. And I'm now on I'm actually working on my fourth album. I don't know if I'll get it out by Christmas time, but certainly the three that are out there is brilliant. And you can buy them all at www.modmusic.co.uk. That's it from our sponsors.
Well, it's good to know that the music's out there. And as you say, it gives it a different context for people to enjoy. I think more people are gaining an awareness of the artistry of the music on its own merit, even outside the context of the show.
I think it was a good idea to do it. Not from a financial, they don't sell that many. I'm not going to retire on this, but it's just nice to put the original themes out there so kids can listen to it and grown-ups can listen to it just with the music. So you haven't got any sound effects or visuals or narration getting in the way. So but there's a lot of it. I mean, I could keep doing this for years, but I'm not going to. But I mean, I just pick the ones I want to do.
That's as good a strategy as any. Last question that I've got for you today, Mike, is when you look back at everything that you accomplished through the show, the friendships, the partnerships you made, the creative ideas you got to explore, what are you most proud of?
I actually think it's because they're still around. I mean, if it wasn't for the internet, this show would have been buried years ago and you would not have heard it, or young people wouldn't have heard it. And I think it's great that it's because of the internet, it is still around. And I'm really proud of that. And also, I mean, I get fan letters and all the rest of it from really nice people all over the world, literally all over the world, and how much they love the Thomas stuff and all. It's a massive, massive thing. And it would be great to re-release it again, all nicely rebooted. I don't mean rebooted, but I mean remixed and nicer visuals and all the rest of it. But it's never going to happen. I mean, Mattel have quite rightly have got an agenda that they want to push the new stuff, and I can understand that. But I'm just happy to keep the old stuff alive. I think if Mattel had their way, they'd get rid of it, but they can't. So I'm enjoying it.
They do play around with it, though. I mean, I don't know if you saw The Adventure Begins, which was their CGI reimagining of the first couple of books, and they used a couple of your themes in there.
Well, which was nice. And well, they own the music. They can do what they like with it. I mean, I wish they'd put it all back in there and put the theme back in, but they're not going to do it. But it's good. It's good that it's still out there. That's it's a nice thing to know that there's people, and I really mean all over the world. In fact, I sent CD over to Russia not that long ago, Chile, and all kinds of places. Whether they ever get them or not, I don't know, but I presume they do anyway. That's it. I think that's my my most proud thing is that they're still there.
Well, Mike, I have to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and talking about this really unique experience that you got to have making this music for this cultural touchstone, especially in the lives of so many children. I have to thank you as a Thomas fan. I really appreciate how much Thomas was a part of my life as a kid and how much your music by proxy was a part of that. And that means a lot to me, as I'm sure it does for a lot of our listeners.
Well, thanks for saying that, Nicholas. I appreciate it. And I'm glad you like the music, because I do.
Well, it's good that you still love it and that you haven't grown sick of it after almost 40 years.
Well, I'm kind of sick of it, but I mean, I still don't mind doing it. I just have a couple of days off and then come back to it.
Good to take breaks. His website is modmusic.co.uk. You can check out the CDs of his reimagining of different Thomas themes, as well as his other creative endeavors. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Take care. Thank you. Bye all.
What a great conversation with Mike, and I really appreciate him coming on the show. But we're just getting started. If you go to the show notes or just listen to the next episode in the stream of whatever you use to receive these podcast episodes, we will be talking to Luke Pickman, the instrument maniac of YouTube, who is reinterpreting these themes. We will also have a book review of the latest novel by Avril Rowlands, creator of God's Wonderful Railway. We talked to her earlier in 2021. She has a new story out. And for the question of the day, we will have a new question and review your answers from episode 112.